goodness, they're multiplying. We're doomed. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. My name is Okadowski here of wearechange.org. And man, oh man, do we have some absolutely wacky and stupid news to get into today, as of course there's a lot of crazy domestic news that, very interestingly, a lot of very powerful people do not want you to know about. So we're going to be talking about that, the latest bombshell events unfolding right now in Ohio, and there might be a list that might be becoming public soon, which would be a very big deal. We're going to be talking about that, plus a lot more. If you like the shirt that I'm wearing right now, you could get it on thebestpoliticalshirts.com, Bill Hicks, OG legend. And the video that we played in the beginning of this broadcast was originally shared on Reddit, and it looks like a video coming from China that reads with a title that this is allegedly streamers that are trying to be in a location that is associated with a wealthy neighborhood in order to get higher donations. Now, I always said, if I go broke, if I don't make it in this industry, or if I get taken down, I'll be underneath the bridge still preaching. But man, these Asian kids have just taken it to another level of dedication that we just gotta respect here. Holy freaking cow. Trying to game a location-based search algorithm? Now that right there is some dedication. Now if only we had these same influencers actually going out and doing journalism, we might actually find out what is happening right now in Ohio, where it looks like there's a human disaster unfolding right now that's oddly not being covered by the corporate media or a lot of the very environmentally friendly, loving, alleged liberal types, as a train derailed in East Palestine, Ohio, as residents there are calling for some transparency and accountability to find out what actually is going on there, as people are alleging that there has been a release of toxic chemicals into the air and waterways in that specific community. A journalist actually has been arrested, and what's really going on in Ohio, well, again, we still don't know, as the corporate media and the authorities there have been oddly very hush-hush about the entire situation. This, as very surprisingly, they're doing the opposite when it comes to UFOs. This after another shoot-down incident by the U.S. military over the U.S. and Canadian airspace. Today, the NORAD commander came out and said that he, quote, doesn't rule out that aliens could be responsible for the unidentified objects. Yes, you heard that correctly. All of this as U.S. Congressmember Marco Rubio, a former defense official, U.S. Senator Marco Rubio, who is also a former defense official, came out just recently and said, quote, it's been happening for years, describing UFOs that he says have been routinely operating over restricted U.S. airspace, and that many Americans, quote, have no idea what they are, where they come from, as the Pentagon is not ruling out that the three objects that were shot down over the weekend could potentially be alien. Now, of course, there's a larger potential here for some kind of advanced military technology, but with such a coordinated PR talking point being regurgitated by many high-level government officials that are usually secretive about this stuff, automatically my first response to this is, I'm skeptical. Now, are there aliens? Did the United States government shoot down aliens and start an intergalactic war? Well, with the way that they've been behaving very aggressively, especially with their foreign policies, it's important not to rule anything out, but it's also important to note that we have no evidence, and we are simply making just assumptions here based on the absence of evidence. But if one thing is true throughout this entire kind of saga, is that the U.S. intelligentsia and Defense Department usually do tell lies. So with them being forthcoming with all of this, definitely raises my conspiracy spidey senses, to say the least. And at a time right now where we need government questioned more than ever, when we need actual transparency, need actual accountability, need our representatives in government to hold the Defense Department accountable, we have politicians like Congresswoman AOC, whose main issue of concern is an advertisement that represented Christian ideology. Yes, you heard that correctly. The number one list of complaints for AOC, who promised to be the congresswoman of the people and really is just a congresswoman of woke multinational globalist corporations, is heavily criticizing a Christian advertisement during the Super Bowl, somehow equating it to fascism, which again, just in my opinion, shows you that most representatives are just paid actors reading a script, as this political stance is a stance by many establishment types and figures that have been promoting and propelling an anti-Christian narrative. Now, no matter what your religion is, I think it's pretty clear that there's been a godless agenda, and that's one of the many issues, very complicated issues, that we describe on LukeUncensored.com, our very own website and platform, where when you join also with a very active community of informed individuals that you could also meet in real life. We have facilitated ways of the many members of LukeUncensored.com to meet each other. We have a lot of great members. We are still continuing our AMA through our forum, and this was supposed to be a one kind of end-off thing. I thought I was going to finish this in a week. Now it's taking multiple weeks because there's so many members, so many great questions, so many awesome conversations that we're just continuing it, as of course I've been overwhelmed with a plethora of incredible questions that we're going to be getting into and continuing to answer through the continuation of our AMA. Here are some of the topics that we're discussing right now. We're talking about Ohio. We're talking about UFOs. We're talking about O'Keefe. Those conversations, plus a new exclusive video available to you later on today with us getting into some very interesting topics, bigger spiritual aspects where we usually could go off the deeper ends, talk about spirituality, talk about religion, talk about interdimensional creatures and entities. We talk about all of that, plus a lot more, all on LukeUncensored.com, where you get a forum, 3 masterclasses, exclusive merchandise, exclusive access to events in real life, and new video reports almost every single day available to you. Get that plus a lot more just by clicking the button here and signing up for less than 50 cents a day. See you there right after this broadcast, as of course we are still not done here, as there's a big legal bombshell that just dropped that I think deserves a lot of our attention and deserves to be talked about in a full, bigger perspective. Now, this of course will happen predominantly on independent media, but it won't happen on the corporate media, which essentially acts like the gatekeepers for a lot of powerful individuals who of course use it and wield corporate media as a way of protecting themselves and their friends from any kind of legal scrutiny. As of course, there's a lot of really bad people out there, and the reason that they exist is because the corporate media refuses to talk about them in any kind of critical way. We got a perspective into this where former MSNBC host Crystal Ball was recently on the Joe Rogan podcast, and she described how MSNBC controlled her coverage of Hillary Clinton in 2014.
Shortly before I was let go, I did a monologue when Hillary Clinton was building up to run for president. It was back in 2014, so this was early on, and I did this whole thing that was like, she's sold out to Wall Street. People are going to hate this lady. She's like the terrible candidate for the moment. Please don't run. And I was allowed to say it, right? I delivered my thing. I did it exactly how I wanted to do it. Afterwards, I get pulled into an office and, great monologue, everything's fine. But next time you do any commentary on Hillary Clinton, it has to get approved by the president of the network. Yeah.
Now, if a network is de-incentivizing and essentially stopping the criticism of a friend of the network, you kind of would have to wonder to yourself, who else are they protecting? And of course, they're protecting a lot of very powerful individuals, and this could be one reason out of many reasons why the story of the decade has been significantly undercovered, and that is the story of Mr. Epstein, who ran an international trafficking operation that involved thousands of children that were procured to very powerful individuals to do what they wanted to with. This is, again, a story that implicates our national security, our local police departments, politicians, our legal systems, judges, prosecutors, Congress members, people of the media moguls, corporate heads, Silicon Valley, Harvard University, our prestigious learning institutions that many people hold to such high regards, all implicated, along, of course, with the big banks, JP Morgan and Chase and Deutsche Bank, that all played a role when it came to aiding and abetting and being a part of an operation that stole small children, kidnapped them in some instances, bribed them in some instances, bought them off in some instances, and said, hey, powerful person, do what you want to them in this room filled with surveillance cameras. And so far, that video footage, those clients, those individuals that did unspeakable things to those small children have yet to be held accountable by our legal system that is implicated in all of this. Now that right there is the story of the decade. This is one of the greatest, biggest injustices that involved not just a few children, not just a dozen children, but on the record, thousands of children here. Now, there's still real-life monsters connected to Mr. Epstein that are walking around on this world that have been unscathed, unbothered, not prosecuted, and not punished by our legal system for committing such horrible crimes, which there's clearly video evidence of. As of course, we know that many of the properties that Mr. Epstein owned had secret surveillance cameras wired and linked up to virtually every single area of the property that he owned, that he got mysteriously through, of course, money that people still cannot account for. That many financial institutions like JP Morgan and Chase and Deutsche Bank made sure that they didn't follow regulations in order to allow this man to run his illegal operation. This, as we're finding out now, that a portion of the names that were implicated here will actually be named, as there's going to be a batch of documents that are going to be containing allegations made against individuals related to the associates of Mr. Epstein that will be made public. This, as they were previously characterized as John and Jane Does. This, as there's a list of 167 individuals that were associates of Epstein, with some of those names that are soon going to be made public, as the court has ruled that these documents should be unsealed. Now, the list and the material and the documents will be made public in the next coming months, as we, of course, will be following this story very closely, as there are many public figures expected to be on this list, and unless something happens to this judge, or something happens to these documents, or the people holding to these documents, they are expected to be made public. Now, first of all, my initial reaction to this is, why would you even announce this? Why not just release the list? The fact that you're saying, hey, we're going to be implicating a lot of public figures here, essentially, in my opinion, creates a situation that could prevent that from happening. As, of course, there were a lot of documents that were promised to be declassified to the American people that were never declassified. I'm looking at all the documents related to JFK, and that's just a little bit of the clandestine operations that we are still not privy to understanding, as there is a plethora of a lot of horrible things that our tax dollars pay for that we have absolutely no idea about. Now, these documents that are going to be made public, hopefully now, are of individuals that are accused of, quote, serious wrongdoing, and the fact that we still don't have the full list here. The fact that there's still videotapes and photos and evidence of horrible individuals doing really bad things that still our legal system has done nothing about shows you how just absolutely corrupted our entire legal system is. As we know, there's a lot of very powerful people implicated here, and there's also a lot of powerful people that we still don't even know about that are implicated here as well. Now, of course, Prince Andrew is one of the individuals that clearly is associated here. He has settled with many of his victims by paying them out of court. This, as Prince Andrew is trying to work up a marketing PR strategy in order to come back to, quote, public life. This, as everyone knows him, for, of course, his close association with Epstein, and rightfully so. He hung out with some really shady characters, the Clintons, the Spaceys, and that's just to name some of them. Now, will there be some kind of bigger revelation? Will this be a bigger cover-up? Will this be stopped? Will the names that will come out be already known to the general public? Well, only time will tell, but it's very interesting that 60 Minutes in Australia actually did an interview with Miss Maxwell that we actually watched. And why are we depending on 60 Minutes in Australia to actually ask legitimate questions of what happened here in the United States, which again highlights exactly what Crystal Ball talked about on the Joe Rogan podcast, that there, of course, there's a silencing, there's a censorship of this story mainly because many powerful people connected to the media here are involved. And I think it's pretty clear that that's happening. Who's on the list that you think would surprise you that's on there? Let me know down in the comment section below. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you guys actively watching and sharing these videos. And this is why I love you guys. Stay tuned for more here on wearechange.org. One more video coming your way right now on lukeuncensored.com. See you there.